Welcome to How Would You Build It? It's me, Bobby, and Renier again for an episode about unicorns. Renier, how are you doing?
Yeah, great. Happy birthday, Bobby. It's
Thank
your
you.
birthday, and I know you're going out for dinner tonight, so you don't have time to edit this part out. But hey, if you are
Sneaky.
connected with Bobby on LinkedIn, why don't you send him a message? You're going to be a day late, but that's fine.
Yeah.
He's going to appreciate it anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, happy birthday, man.
Thanks very much. I've made it around the sun one more time.
Yes. And many more
Great.
to go.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Actually, that's an interesting question that we could bring. So we're going to talk unicorns today, and there's a list that we'll be sharing, and I know that in the open letter, it'll be dedicated towards the topic of unicorns and bootstrapping a unicorn, which is no easy feat. For anyone that's got a startup will know that that's not an easy feat. But a question that I have, thinking, seeing as we're talking about age and all of that, but like, what is the average age of a founder? That has gotten a company to a unicorn. Do you have any idea?
Yes, I saw something somewhere, so I would guess it's closer to 40 than it's closer to 30.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I remember reading somewhere that 45 is the average age of a founder. So like for
Mm.
people out there that are in their 30s and trying to take their stab at being a founder. Oh, and you're back.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing somewhere that I think the average age of a founder or an entrepreneur is 45, of a successful entrepreneur. So if you're getting those bootstrapping wings, founder wings, and you're 35 and you're struggling to make it, hang in there, because it generally takes a couple of years. It takes a couple of tries before you get that idea that really takes off. Renee, I know
Yeah.
you've been exposed to many founders in your time, so I'm sure you can probably vouch for that.
Yeah, I think the older founders, the one obviously they have life experience, which really helps a lot, and overcoming some of the difficult challenges of being a founder. I think the second thing is, when you get to a certain age, the people you've met in your life, your age group people, whether it be at university or school or just in social circles, they grow up to work in different positions in business where they have influence, right? So you have a bit of a network as well.
Yeah.
So if you need to get a pilot at some corporate, you might know someone that works there, know them from school, and they might have the authority to give you the go ahead, right? So it's that part. And then finally, when we get closer to 40, we end up being a bit more responsible, right? So, when you start a startup, you don't start a startup to fool around. You started to build it and actually make a success of it. Like, when a lot of times when we're in our 20s, we think this is something fun, let's try it. So,
Yeah.
I think those three aspects really count in their favor. Obviously, something that counts against them is the fact that at that stage of your life, a lot of people have kids and have some other responsibilities. So, it's not always possible for people to make that leap. So, I think there's possibly a potential for a accelerator that focuses on helping older people, particularly people that have worked in corporate for a long time, that want to transition into being a founder at that age, like figuring out how to make that work, and helping them with that because of the higher success rate and the fact that having worked in a corporate, these people understand corporate well. So building a B2B,
Yeah.
which is a really good idea in South Africa because we've got strong corporates with a lot of money to spend and solutions that helps them achieve more of what they want to do.
Yeah.
I think there's something there. So
Yeah.
we need an accelerator to help people get out of corporate.
Yeah. You speak of which, I know you know Roger Norton. I actually saw a tweet of his today, funny enough, where someone said we need exactly what you just said. And then he's like, why do we need more? Let's just help the accelerators and the incubators that we already have, just to kind of give them extra power. And I think he makes a good point there. It speaks exactly to what you had. But I think we're jumping the gun a little bit, Renier, because we're kind of going into, how would you do it, right? We're talking about the age, your networks, and all of that. I think the first thing I would like you to do and help us and help the audience understand is what classifies as a unicorn and why does everybody strive to be one?
Yeah, so Unicorn is a company that's worth $1 billion in company valuation, right? But there's this little caveat to the definition of this, where a lot of companies raise money at that valuation. It doesn't really mean that's what the company is worth from a generating income and sustainable wealth for its shareholders. But it does put down a marker of what people backing the company believe it to be worth at that point in time, right? So, for those who are new to the concept, if you were to raise a certain amount of money just before, as you get product market fit and you were to raise a certain amount of money, the money you raise would be for a certain amount of equity, meaning there would be a value assigned to what they believe the company is worth. And typically that value they'll assign could be worth way more than what the company is generating at that point, simply based on what they believe a potential future value could be.
Yeah.
Now, this doesn't follow accounting. It follows supply and demand principles and FOMO. So don't try and make accounting sense of a lot of this. A lot of, if I look at some of these numbers, I'm like, this is simply FOMO. Like, why are people buying at these valuations? But nonetheless, it's kind of a metric in startups that we use and speak about. Like, is it a unicorn yet? Africa has 5 unicorns, I believe, at the moment, companies that have raised at those valuations. India, interestingly enough, more than 100. Population of India, population of Africa is very similar. India producing more than 100 unicorns. It's quite fascinating. We've discussed it on the podcast before, like India,
the STEM
focus 20 years ago, and how that's resulted in them being so far ahead when it comes to the stuff. But yeah, nonetheless, CBS, which is a research institute, cbsinsights.com, they released this list of unicorn companies, which has a total of 1,206 companies on, and the cumulative value is $3,828 billion, which is quite a lot. And the list does not feature public companies. So it does not feature the likes of Airbnb, Facebook, Adobe, Google, Amazon, those kind of companies. It's only private companies. So companies that have raised money and publicly declared what they've raised, but they are not they're not public yet. So the thinking is for VCs is that these companies would either go public at a higher valuation than what they currently have, or that they would sell to other companies. A recent example that was quite big in the news is when Figma sold to Adobe for $20 billion. So a lot of the VCs, the valuation of Figma wasn't near that. If Figma were on this list before they sold, the valuation would have been quite low. Or substantially lower than the 20 billion. So the VC invested at a lower number, sold at 20 billion.
Yeah, and just for people that don't know Figma, I mean, if you're in product or tech, you would probably know Figma is a design tool that people use to design their apps or websites, whatever it is. And yeah, they kind of bootstrapped and did really well. And that 20 billion valuation or that purchase happened just before the tech bubble burst. So a lot of people are saying, is it still valued that, considering? But nonetheless, well done to the guys at Figma to get there. But right at the top of the list, ByteDance, and that's TikTok. And I just, for the life of me, I use TikTok, I'll admit it. I like to stay abreast with, technology. As a product manager, you kind of need to know what everyone's doing. You need to be, you have to have your nose in everyone's app so that you can also understand when you come across something similar. Anyways, I use TikTok, and for the life of me, I can't see where the business model is and the revenue, and for them to be at that level. So I don't know, how would you say that they got to this point?
Well, firstly, Bobby, I really enjoy those dance videos that you have on TikTok. They're amazing.
Yeah. Listen, the sprinkler, it's one of a kind.
Going. But yeah, incredibly at the top of the list, we've got ByteDance valued at $225 billion. Which is absolutely insane. Just to put that in context, the second on the list, we have SpaceX. That's literally, sending people into space using rockets, and they valued at 137 billion. So almost 80 billion more for TikTok than SpaceX, which is fascinating, right? So TikTok, it's also interesting. People label them as an artificial intelligence company.
I saw that.
And not as a social media company. So if you think about that, like, there's something in there. And really the success of TikTok, if you've used it before, is somehow they get you to keep watching.
Yep.
Like, and I do find they take you on a specific journey. Like if you watch a cat video 0.72 seconds too long, you get more cat video. And so you must be careful what you're looking at on TikTok, because otherwise you'll just be seeing more of that. But I think the value of the company really is understanding what people like. That's what they're banking on. The algorithms and artificial intelligence that powers this video engine really as a means to really understand what are you interested in.
Yeah.
And I think that value of understanding what people are interested in from a marketable perspective, like marketing things to them,
Exactly.
investors perceive this to be, extremely valuable.
Yeah. I
So,
think I
yeah,
saw,
fascinating.
yeah, I can't remember if it was Gary Vaynerchuk. I can't remember who it was, but they kind of said, what TikTok have done is they've kind of changed the game in terms of, when we used to, like, let's take Twitter, for example, you would only see a feed of the people you follow. It's the same as Facebook, right? You just see the feed of people that you follow, where TikTok changed their algorithm looking at the interests. So now it's interest based and not people following based. And I think that's the big game changer here.
Big
And what's
difference, yeah.
interesting is if you think about how they've disrupted, I mean, Instagram went double down on Reels, and YouTube doubled down
Yep.
on these shorts. And that is all thanks to TikTok's disruption of the market, that's
Yep.
interesting.
And now to put it in context, I mean, Facebook's valued at roughly 500 billion. So, I mean, that's half the value of Facebook. So it's not, if they were to list, they'd probably expect a listing of, close to $1 trillion, which might be one of the biggest. I haven't checked, but it might be the biggest listing of a software company ever.
Yeah.
So, currently 225, if they were to list, they're probably going to do it at way higher. And their revenue is good, right? I think they reported 80 billion revenue last year.
Sure.
Which is quite substantial. So it's definitely not a company that's just burning money and going nowhere slowly. They're definitely on track with their plans.
Yeah. And I see our friends at OpenAI are not too far down the line as well. And they're probably only just going to get further. Does this figure that we have include their Microsoft investments?
It should. I think what is fascinating about that is they've got a CEO who has no shares in the company.
What?
So
that is interesting.
Yeah, so Sam Altman has no shares in OpenAI, which I thought was quite an interesting dynamic. And I'd love to figure out, like, well, what kind of power does he have? Because I think the motivation behind it could be, if he has no shares, he has no financial incentive, meaning making the ethical decisions on what the business should do could be easier for him because there's no financial alignment. He can simply act on what he thinks is the best interest of the platform. Will that work? I don't know. I hope so. So please, don't turn into an evil genius.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at the list, and I think what's great is like the industry, right? So artificial intelligence, ByteDance, right? So obviously that algorithm and the way it's reading people's behaviors is kind of regarded as artificial intelligence. We've got that, and there's a lot of fintech. I see, for those people that have been to Europe or know friends that live in Europe, they would tell you about Revolut, which is an all-encompassing financial app. And they're on the list, and I'm not surprised to see that, because everyone that uses them loves them, and kind of waiting for them to come to South Africa almost.
Yeah, so one that stood out for me, Bobby, which was awesome. I think fifth on the list is a little tool that anybody in social media has used called Canva. Canva, from down under in Australia, a female founder, built an amazing business. I grew up using Microsoft Publisher to make cards for people for birthdays, right? And we would print them out and fold them this way, and it was just awesome. Everybody thought I was a design genius using Microsoft Publisher. But those kind of tools just fell by the wayside, and you always had to kind of ask a design friend to, spin up Adobe and make you something nice, until Canva came around. And I think it's an incredible tool. They've built something amazing, and they've captured a market there. And they've also recently launched their AI tools, which I think is really cool. I think anybody in social media, or any founder thinking of not hiring a social media person yet, Canva is a go-to tool. So 40 billion, female founder, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's changed the way I do business and do stuff. Canva is really, really helpful. So also not a surprise there. And it's nice to see Australia on the map, because you don't really hear much about the down under kind of tech companies. So that's really cool as well. A Stripe payments.
At least their tech is better than their rugby. So.
Oh, and that's a dig.
Sorry, I like Aussies.
And there's Miro, I think Discord. I think there's some big names here. And nice to see a bit of blockchain a little bit further down the line. You got blockchain.com and OpenSea, which was the NFT craze of 2 years ago, still on the list.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think unless something happens, that valuation's probably not going to realize the kind of gains they're looking for. Obviously, traffic on OpenSea's died down, but just under OpenSea, I see Grammarly, which I thought was quite interesting, $13
Yeah.
billion. I thought about Grammarly. Grammarly reads everything I type, so they're getting a lot of input to train that AI model.
Oh, good point.
In perhaps not the best English, but nonetheless they're getting it. And a lot of people use Grammarly. I think it's a really cool tool. I just find it very interesting. I find the free version offering exactly the same values the paid for one. So I hope they have a plan to make more money down the line. But yeah, Grammarly, very interesting. 13 billion
Yeah.
on the
I love
list.
Grammarly.
Some other another startup which I saw on the list, but it's quite far down. So having clicked on a lot of different things, I found a hardware startup called Helion Energy, which is
Okay.
working on a fusion power plant. Right.
Oh, wow.
So these guys, so fusion energy, basically you get that when two atoms merge, there's some energy released. But this happens at extreme heat. So these guys have been able to get to a heat of 100 million degrees Celsius. They've already gotten to that point. And now they're working on this thing to get two atoms to merge to release energy, capturing that energy, and building like a circle and extracting energy in the process to basically build unlimited free electricity. Well, free, they
Amazing.
obviously charge, but and it's completely clean. There's
Yeah.
nothing that comes out of it. So I was like,
Wow.
no solar panels. If we can get that stuff going, that's going to change the world. But in saying that, there's a lot of people that don't necessarily want the world to change. People who are currently supplying
Yeah.
coal to power plants, oil into the global economy. Like,
Yes.
so, would be very interesting to see how this whole story unfolds
Yeah.
going forward. But
Yeah.
but I thought that's fascinating. I saw another company, I can't remember their name, but they basically turn fish scales into, which is a byproduct of the fishing industry. They turn that into construction materials, so basically kitchen tops. So they've got a process of working that in, creating the most beautiful kitchen tops using
That's
fish
crazy.
scales. So,
Yeah.
so it's amazing to see, me being more on the software side of things and
Yeah.
working on startups. I find it really interesting to see some of these hardware companies. And, Helion Energy could very well be worth way more than $225 billion if they figure that out. Uh,
Exactly.
and as such, many of the other hardware startups could be way
Mm.
bigger than TikTok,
No, listen,
providing practical things.
I think that's a nice caveat that we can go to soon in terms of the conversation about like what kind of industries to go into. But just wanted to touch on a previous podcast that we spoke about with the whole SVB bank fall and bank run and all of that. That was a bank that was actually funding or holding funds for a lot of these kind of these early stage bootstrapping companies. And that is why a lot of people said the government had to step in, because you'll literally be putting a very hard stop on innovation in America, which would have had detrimental like kind of impact on all of this innovation and kind of where we're going. I mean, this helium thing that you're telling me about, I mean, imagine we stop learning more about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a really good point, Bobby, because practically at the end of the day, we can look at this stuff cold and hard and go, well, governments aren't supposed to bail out banks, right?
Yeah,
Now,
exactly.
I'd love it if governments don't do that, right? I really would.
Yeah.
But I would hate to see technology companies working on a solution such as clean energy,
Exactly.
and getting so close. I believe they're a few years away of massive breakthroughs.
Exactly.
Having to go under because some banker made a mistake.
Exactly.
It's a
Or the
really
Fed
complicated
made a
situation.
mistake. It might not even be the bank. It might not be the founder. It's actually the federal government that's telling us that they're like, no, let's just send, money in the post box, like.
Print more money.
But there's another industry that I think is also quite interesting around this. It's I'm going to get it wrong, but I think it's about genetics, genome. I don't know what it all is. I haven't done my homework on this one, but like I know that like what they're able to do with like identifying cancer early or being able to modify your genes or your DNA to prevent you from getting certain things. I think
It's like
there's a
cancer
whole
vaccines. They're using artificial intelligence to map out what a cancer vaccine could look like.
Sure, imagine. That's crazy.
Definitely.
But yeah, so that's the thing. So that's why I want to sort of caveat. Let's now start talking about how would you build it, right? So now we've just kind of given some examples. I don't know. Renier, you also shared a slide of startups that top 10 bootstrapped unicorns and that sold. So I don't know if you want to just touch on that. I see MailChimp took 17 years to sell for 12 billion.
Yeah, so something we've got in a newsletter as well is a list of a few software companies that bootstrap, and these companies sold for billions, having never raised any significant funding. So MailChimp, after 17 years, they sold for $12 billion US, which is fascinating because MailChimp, and its front end, anybody that's used it, it's quite simple. But obviously a lot of tech in the background, customer base really, at the time when they were sold, I think they were quite secure in their position in the market, that are massive market share. At the moment, there's a lot more email tools, but back then it was quite big.
They were for me, when I think of emailing tools, MailChimp is always the first one that comes to mind. So yeah, but there's a lot more now out there.
Yeah, people would, if it's almost, it's similar to Google. They just Google it. People would just use MailChimp to set up
exactly.
So another interesting one, GitHub sold for 7.5 billion after 6 years to Microsoft. That's more than R1 billion worth of per year in effort, which is fascinating.
Amazing. Wow.
And then, speaking of down under, Atlassian, after 21 years, they never sold, never raised any money, but they're busy buying companies for $300 million. So it's amazing what they've built, completely bootstrapping it over a period of 20 years. So some interesting stories. So it's possible. You can build a startup without raising funding, and get it to a place of selling it for billions of dollars, or even getting yourself to a point where you buy other companies for billions of dollars.
100%. It's very interesting. I think I didn't realize, I've never really thought of Atlassian. I mean, I think of Atlassian, I get a bit of a twitch because I'm not the biggest Jira fan, but the fact that I'm forced to use it, you kind of realize why they've done what they've done, and the processes that they force you to follow. But
I saw a fascinating tweet the other day. They said GPT-4, does this or that, and they go GPT-5 builds complete websites, 6 drives cars and builds this, and then it goes on, it becomes more advanced.
I know where
and
this
then
is going.
GPT-9 attempts to understand how Jira works and resorts to asking a human to help.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah.
I'm like, that's quite
for anyone,
I think that's spot on.
Yeah, it is. For anyone that works with Jira will know that, although you get the people that live by it and stand by it, and I get it and I understand. I'm definitely getting to understand it better in my current roles that I've been using Jira lately. But yeah, what a pain. Okay, so let's move on now.
I feel like you need to grow up with Jira to appreciate it. For us late joiners, there's some other tools that just seem to get the job done a bit better. But anyhow, nonetheless, they built an incredible company. Obviously, Basecamp and Confluence and all of the other products that part of it.
Yeah, they are good. They have their place. I don't want to completely knock them.
They bought Trello, right? Didn't they buy
exactly. Trello for me is, I mean, for anyone that wanted to start using a project management tool, I'd get them to start on Trello.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest to use. Okay. Now, how would you build it, Renier? I think, South Africa's got its challenges. I can't help but to think, we our audience is sitting in South Africa, and here I am, stage 6 load shedding again, lots of challenges that face us. So what do you think would contribute to someone that's going to aim for an African unicorn?
Yeah, look, just on electricity, I see the Minister of Electricity announcing stage 6 and then saying we need more money to fix Eskom. I'm like, wow, that's quite an insight. Anyhow,
where have I heard that before? Deja vu. What's a Groundhog Day?
Unfortunately, it's the truth. We need a lot of money to sort out Eskom. But anyhow, look, I think there's really one of two ways to go about it, right? So the first is you set out to do it from day one. The second one is you work long and hard on one specific passion, and that company happens to grow into an enormous company, right? So there are actually examples of a lot of South African companies that have done that. I mean, Capitec is one of those examples, probably one of the recent ones, right? So what is it? Capitec is 25, 30 years old. I think they're 25 years old. I'm not sure. But that is an example of it, right? They started out building a bank with a really good strategy, really simple strategy, but it's well executed with a lot of hard work.
They understood the market, and I think that's something that everyone should pay attention to. Is
Yeah,
how
it was really smart. Like
exactly, yeah.
And those who don't know, the original model back in the day is, there were cash loan businesses in every small town, like every corner of the earth. You could see cash loans, cash loans. I remember growing up, like every cash loans. I'm like, Jesus, cash loans everywhere.
You're right, actually.
And Capitec used it as a way to acquire customers. They would buy these guys, so they consolidated the market of the cash loan business, converted those loans into more favorable loans, which is the Capitec loans of today, which still exist, and converted them into banking customers. So they literally bought a customer base, which I thought was really smart.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's an example of working long and hard. They raised money, but they also a lot of it was hard work and building the thing organically. So that's one way of doing it, and I think it's definitely likely, but that's not necessarily something you plan for. You plan on doing spotting opportunity, seeing a strategy, executing that strategy, and taking it step by step. And maybe that becomes an enormous company. Maybe you build a company that does a few $100 million a year. It's profitable. Employs a lot of people, serves the shareholders well. Like that's also beautiful and fine. And I think we need a lot more of that. But if you take the path of a hypergrowth startup, I think the most important thing to understand is that these startups become unicorns or become valued at that level and eventually exit, if they do, for a large amount of money, because they have a market position that's dominant, right? So there's this book by Reid Hoffman, I believe, called Blitzscaling, and he speaks about these companies need to become the biggest, the fastest, right? And it's very similar if you think about cell phone networks. Like if someone were to come into South Africa and launch a cell phone network, sure, it's tough to compete against Vodacom and MTN, right? It's almost impossible because these guys were first. They established themselves. It's just hard enough for anybody. Actually, building a bank is also really hard because you're up against all these established businesses. So, in the world of startup, what happened is, there's these new sectors or industries that are created, which obviously disrupt the old way of doing things. And, the person that becomes the biggest, the quickest, is most likely to capture all the opportunity from that space. So the game really is you set out on a mission to capture that market. You raise as much money as often as you possibly can. And you basically commit your life for 10 to 20 years to work 12 hours a day, probably 6 days a week, to make this thing a reality. And that's what it requires. So a lot of people find a thrill in that. And I think there's a lot of people in South Africa that have the kind of mental discipline and attitude to go for it, but it's not everybody's piece of cake. So actually, why I say that is I want to encourage a lot of founders. If that's not what you want to do, you can build a really good business not following that route. I mean, you can choose the 40-hour-a-week entrepreneurial route, and try and work smart as much as you can. Be frugal for early on. Focus on generating revenue. Focus on a business model that's cash flow positive, cash flow generative. Like focusing on getting cash in to continue to finance the growth of the business. And who knows? It might become an Atlassian. It might become maybe you raise money down the line if you want to take it to the next step. So I think that's really important to understand. And I there's a lot of, if you go to startup events and if you speak to founders, a lot of the talk and the thinking is around becoming a unicorn startup, right? But then you speak to a lot of people and you realize this idea could actually work, but it's not a unicorn. It's just a solid business, profitable business.
That's what I wanted to ask you there, is kind of like, what would identify a company to have unicorn potential?
Yeah, I think it's going after a market that is new and untapped, or largely untapped, and having and it's big enough to justify a really big company. So I'm going into the dark because I'm load shedding, and I'm back.
I've already been here for 4 hours. I've been. When did it start? Hey, I should be coming back on soon.
You had your 4-hour detention.
Yeah,
nice.
Exactly.
So just coming back to the point, I think it needs to be a really big market, and it needs to. What the entrepreneur is building needs to be able to scale to capture a large segment of that market, and become something that's frequently used, typically by the people in that market. So frequency of transaction.
Okay, so just I want to paint a picture for you quickly. You are 40 years old and you have a business idea that you think is going to be large. You know that you're going to have to commit. You just said that you're going to have to commit for, let's say, 10 years to get this thing to a point of being a unicorn. Would you
Yeah.
focus on Africa right now? Or would you say, I'll, experiment here, but I'm going to take it somewhere else? Or do you feel
So
like for the next 10 years, Africa is a place you would want to double down on?
So not necessarily in tech enabled or businesses that have tech front and center in it. The consumer market for tech isn't big, so there's not a lot of B2C opportunity yet. I mean that's still growing and developing. I think in the B2B space perhaps, but that's not going to follow the typical route of a unicorn. I'm involved in a company that's doing ERP software for food processing, and they're doing really well. But it's been a company that's been bootstrapped and built over 15 years, and after 15 years they're now positioned well to really grow and become even more successful. But it took 15 years, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's not a path of a unicorn startup. A unicorn startup sets out and launches fast and wants to capture a significant market share. And even in South Africa, if you were to capture a significant market share quickly, let's say within 5 years, it's not necessarily going to get you to a unicorn status. It's not going to be.
Mm.
It might not even be big enough to list on a local stock exchange. So
Mm.
that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It's just that's not this path, right? Something that's the first thing. So size of market, size of opportunity,
Yeah.
the velocity of the economy, and then the size velocity meaning how quickly a rand flows through the economy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just not as big as America, right? That's the first thing. The second thing which I've seen is I've engaged with these amazing founders, and typically builder founders, software developers, right? And I build one or two things and I go, cool, I've learned a lot, but I kind of feel like I've hit my ceiling in terms of being challenged to really take my thinking and how I build things to the next level. They're all queuing up to get into YC, right? They want to go to Y Combinator, they
Yeah.
want to go meet and mingle with the best people and get challenged to build something enormous, right? So the combination of the market being there together with this network of people that really understand how to build this stuff is just what makes it more attractive to go and build it there, because it's not about money. That's the whole point. I think, by the way, that's probably one of the most important points here. It's not about the money. Like Zuckerberg didn't build Facebook to be rich. Neither did Steve Jobs to build Apple. Like, it's not about money. It's about a journey and a mission,
And a passion.
and a journey and a mission and a passion that is fulfilling. It's the same with Elon Musk. I mean, so like there's a parody account on Twitter that posts like a picture of just a mattress in a room, and they go, Elon Musk, this is Elon Musk's bed, and he
Mm.
actually replied, he said, it's not too far off.
I
I
saw it.
slept on a
Yeah.
friend's couch last week, right?
Yeah.
So Elon Musk's not doing it for the money. Like,
Yeah.
it's, well, at least that's not his primary motivator as far as I'm concerned.
Mm. Mm.
It's about really having a passion for the process, the struggle, the challenges, and all of that. So
Waking up in the morning and wanting to solve that problem.
yeah, like a burning desire to do it. And I think that's so important for everyone. Like, find something that you're passionate about. Find the kind of challenges you love solving, right?
Mm.
And if that happens to be an industry leader, capture a market, and build something that changes humanity for the next 20 years, then go for it, raise money as much as you can, and go to America if you need to do it over there, and build a unicorn.
Mm.
But for a lot of that's quite a unique species, by the way. It's quite a very few people, I believe, that actually fit that kind of
Yeah.
desire and passion. Whereas most people can find a lot of meaning in building really successful businesses. Even doing maybe 1 million or 2 million a year. Never mind 50
Mm.
million. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of meaning and purpose in that for a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to encourage a lot of founders actually don't get obsessed with the unicorn path. Like
Yeah.
do it your way and build what you think is going to be meaningful.
Mm. I read the book from the Nike founder. Can't remember his name now.
Shoe Dog.
Yeah, Shoe
Full
Dog.
night.
Phil Knight, that's it. Thank you. I read that recently, and what I loved about one of the analogies is he kept using as a racer, as an athlete, he was always coming second, and he used this analogy of always looking at the person in front of him, and that was his target. So if he was coming fourth, he was just looking at getting to the third. And when he was third, he was just looking to be at second. And I really love that, right? So if you're starting your company, like kind of look at who's in front of you and make that your target. Once you've surpass them, you're running that race, who's your next target? And I like that. And I think that's also something I would kind of advise people, not that I've done it before, but I like the analogy that he kind of shares.
Yeah, that's great. It's like, you run your race, make sure you're getting better every day, and build it. And some people build unicorns. There's lots of them out there.
Yeah.
Even South Africans like Elon Musk.
Yeah.
But
well, I actually wanted to turn it
three.
around, Rene, and actually get you to let's put a plight out there and ask to get some South Africans or Africans who watch this and say, well, if you've got a unicorn, let us know about it so we can chat to you. I think what would you say to them to get them to talk to us?
Yeah, come on the show. Let's chat about it. Let's bounce ideas. Let's give you some airtime, and let's support you in doing it. Like, I'd love to see more South African companies do that and be successful in doing that. The funny thing is, I think there's a lot of South African companies doing that or South African founders that actually they're not playing the startup theater game. Like, I mean, if you think about it, Rain is an incredible company. It's
Okay.
the whole business model is so incredibly cash flow positive, like upfront monthly fees. I think the service has gotten a lot better. It's an incredible company, and I haven't checked. It's a private company. I don't know the valuations, but I mean, they put out a bid the other day to buy Telkom, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh wow, yeah, I think I did see that. You're right.
So they're not a small company. They might be a unicorn to be honest, but they're not on this list because what they've raised wasn't really. These guys are not playing startup theater. They're building businesses. Right.
Yeah.
So, Time Bank, another example, there's quite a few of these guys in South Africa that have done it. They're just not in startup theater.
Yeah, you're right. Because it's all about distribution, right? You need to get it out. You need to get into people's lips like every day. People need to be talking about it. So yeah, help us help you. Let's get on the show and let's chat about what you're doing and how you're doing it and how we can help others do the same thing. But Rene, I've got to get to that dinner. So this has been great. And for any unicorns, and that's a wrap for unicorns today. Look forward to next week. Rene, thanks very much again.
Lekker, Bobby. Happy birthday.
Thanks.